Good evening, everyone, or perhaps good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're tuning in from. I would like to welcome you back to our sort of virtual museum space. We have a really exciting year ahead of us as we continue to produce an array of programs and exhibitions that deepen our understanding of Orthodox art and continue our exploration of Slavic culture. I hope that you will stay on this journey with us and continue to support the museum in the many different ways that you do. It is truly appreciated. Tonight's lecture is presented in conjunction with our special exhibition, Icons for Our Time, Orthodox Art from Around the World. The exhibition looks at 15 contemporary icons, highlighting the innovation of the modern icon painter. And if we are to consider the modern Orthodox icon, what better time than now to hear about Orthodox cinema? For those of you who are local to the museum, I do want to mention that we are screening 3 films for free tomorrow, starting at 1 o'clock. I would now like to introduce tonight's speaker, Chris Vlahonasios. See, this is why we rehearsed it. Chris Vlahonasios is an Orthodox media expert based in Melbourne, Australia, and owner of Transfigure Media. Operating since 2008, Transfigure is a creative media network for Orthodox Christian filmmakers and artists. The organization's goals are to showcase, promote, and distribute the creative works and services of Orthodox talent. In 2014, Chris founded Byzanfest International Orthodox Film Festival, which screens online and is hosted in several countries, including the Museum of Russian Icons. Byzanfest 2020 streamed feature films for the first time, as well as shorts. The festival aims to help grow and foster Orthodox cinema for a global audience. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Chris.
Thank you very much, Amy. I'd just like to thank again the Museum of Russian Icons for sponsoring this year's Byzanfest, and of course to Amy Consalvi for putting this together and bring us all here to hopefully have a really interesting discussion about Orthodox cinema. So thank you again for all your support and all your team members for making this happen. Well, look, I guess I can I'll start. And I also have some power slides, so I'll be jumping between screens. But to get a bit of an introduction, before we can truly understand what Orthodox cinema is, we need to actually experience a taste of Orthodox inspired creativity. I should be jumping between screens properly. So this is tonight's topic, as you can see, looking at the 16:9 icon, cinema and Orthodox spirituality. Now, when we talk about Orthodox-inspired creativity, it applies not just to film, but all forms of human creativity. So whether that be 2D paintings or photography, but tonight, of course, will be about cinema. And as Amy just mentioned before, there'll be 3 films on offer to enjoy tomorrow. So we have the film 500, which is a short film from 2020 Byzanfest, and that won basically every category in the short film collection. That is a film about Orthodox spirituality expressed through a narrative. And then you have a really wonderful feature film which screens this year at Byzanfest, which is Langa. And that's a documentary showing how Orthodoxy is lived through culture, and in particular, Romanian culture through Christmas carols, and how the local youth there are really embracing their heritage. And the final film on offer is Mark, which is a short comedy that is created within the Orthodox spirit, or the Orthodox approach, I more commonly call it. But you'll see, and I'll discuss in more detail, why each of these films form each a class of Orthodox cinema. And so sorry, I'm just trying to jump between screens now. Actually, look, I'll just stay on the power slides then, actually. So tomorrow you'll be just experiencing a taste of the diversity that Orthodox cinema offers. It's important to note that the Orthodox faith is not some kind of self-contained, mutually exclusive entity that's separate from other aspects of one's life. Someone who calls himself an Orthodox Christian. True Orthodox cinema and in general Orthodox creativity are in fact intertwined and inseparable from a filmmaker's life. When orthodoxy is practiced as part of one's lifestyle, that is their praxis, it inspires, influences, and enlightens every aspect of one's life, as well as their way of thinking. And we refer to the throma, that is a person's mindset. It then forms part of their creative process and their expression. It doesn't seek, the faith doesn't seek to restrict or limit one's creativity, but it helps enrich their work and helps the person, the individual, to discern what is both beautiful and beneficial. And of course, what I mean by beautiful doesn't always mean it has to be a pretty picture or an unflawed character. Actually, some of the best examples of Orthodox cinema, and pretty much I would say most Orthodox cinema actually, involve very flawed characters, as I will discuss later on with some really fantastic examples, which you can actually watch online for free as well. And as part of someone who's living an Orthodox approach to life, it doesn't mean that other influences, pardon me, and other inspirations cannot be part of their creativity. This is especially as God's grace and energy exist in all things. So it's about taking what's good and trying to do something wonderful with it. What really matters is how we use it. And especially creativity, we need to consider its impact on others. It doesn't mean that an Orthodox filmmaker has to have, or even an artist in general, Orthodox artist, doesn't mean that their work has to have a spiritual message within it. I'll get into that a little bit later in our discussions. So I'm just trying to jump it now. Here we go. So what is cinema? Well, cinema is the visual and audio expression of an idea. What is portrayed in film, like all creative mediums, impacts humans' physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being. For Orthodox filmmakers, there's a high sense of responsibility for I would call their creative impact on others. And this draws us to a very important, a very influential piece of literature called, it was written by St. Basil, and it's called St. Basil's Letter to the Youth, or St. Basil's Address to the Youth. And this was written almost 1700 years ago. And it's a really remarkable letter, which if you're an artist or even just a creative person, or even as a consumer of media, I highly recommend you read this letter. It's very short, actually. It only takes about maybe 20 minutes to read. The saint here talks about the physiological, the psychological, and of course, the spiritual impact of creativity. And it applies to both as audience members and to creators. And in his letter, amongst many other things that he discusses, it doesn't mean that as Orthodox people, we cannot enjoy films which don't contain any spiritual messages. He refers to Homer's Odyssey. He refers to, because he was written, of course, during what was still mostly pagan society, and looking at how you can take some benefit from things which may not even contain a spiritual mind, a Christian mindset. One of the most important things that St. Basil talks about is being the bee, which is to take what's beneficial from each flower in the field, because not all flowers contain good quality nectar. And this applies to Orthodox creativity and Orthodox cinema. And that now moves us on to what exactly is the 16:9 icon, as I like to call it. Well, the 16:9 icon refers to, or 16:9 that I should say, refers to the ratio that is used to enjoy film in HD. It's close to the 1.85 to 1 ratio that theatres use for widescreen movies, but it's when we think of films as icons, this takes on pardon me, a new meaning. The fact is that as Orthodox filmmakers, we see that we're all icons because we're all made in the image and likeness of God. And this just applies not only to living icons, but to even icons such as the earth, the environment, even the universe, because these are all, as Orthodox Christians, we believe are created by God, and they are all icons. And then it's how we present these icons on screen that they become part of this 16:9 icon. Well, one of the most interesting things I've learned about Orthodox Cinema, which I've been following for quite a long time, is that Orthodox Cinema is very holistic. It really likes to pack in everything. And what I mean by this is not just simply spiritual lessons, but it includes looking at nature, looking at culture, technology, history, personal human experience, everything. It's pretty much an understanding of everything. And some wonderful examples, which we'll go through later, will demonstrate that. And finally, Orthodox Cinema, I like to think of it as also cinematic theology. It takes aspects of Orthodox spirituality, and I guess you could say, and doctrine, and tries to express it in a creative way that hopefully audience members will obtain some kind of benefit from. And Orthodox creativity in general, this is sort of in a nutshell everything I've been talking about, but it's a manifestation of theology, practices, and culture expressed in an artistic way. It interweaves all aspects of our human existence and shows how it relates to our spiritual life. And it's also a very complex and multi-layered art form. Pardon me. It's in our nature as icons, in the image and likeness of God, to be creators. And I say that in a small c, because if we are in the image and likeness of God, he is the creator, like the big C. And we have those gifts inherited, of which then we have the freedom to then express and to be creative. But sometimes we don't always create things that might be good for others. And I just want to also show in a nutshell the three main types, the three main classes of Orthodox cinema, which I've been talking a little bit about. So we have the first type, which are films which are explicitly about God or about the spiritual life, and they contain very clear messages, which we will say, oh, okay, that is definitely an Orthodox film. And then we have the second type, which are documentaries, and that I would say would be a perfect example of the film Lunga, which is documenting the Orthodox faith, the culture, traditions, and the people, and of course the history of those Orthodox people. And finally, excuse me, and finally, there's a third type of Orthodox cinema which do not contain expressed spiritual messages, but reflect a Orthodox approach to a subject matter or genre. Such films are about expressing human creativity and showing off the skills and talents of that filmmaker. It's simply about, and there might be even films which are created by Orthodox filmmakers, which are just simply there to be enjoyed. Because even St. Basil wrote in the letter to the youth that he talks about the tree, where it's not just something that's practical that can bear fruit, but it's something which is aesthetically beautiful. If you look at the bark of a tree, it could be aesthetically pleasing. It doesn't serve any benefit, that is practical benefit, but it enriches you. And even being under the tree, the leaves are something to admire, and the leaves also provide shade. So it's looking at something which, okay, bears fruit, but also has other aspects of benefit, which are just there, or which are just to be enjoyed. So that could be the same thing with Orthodox cinema of this particular class. Now, tomorrow you're in for a real treat. As Amy mentioned, there'll be 3 films. And one of those films, which fall into the first category of Orthodox cinema, is the film 500. This is from Romania, and this was actually made by an Orthodox filmmaker with a lot of experience in advertising and making feature films. It's a film which starts off with Psalm 50, and so it's a film about repentance. You have a female character, Maria, who is haunted by a child. I don't want to spoil too much of the film. I would like you to obtain or to unravel the film yourself. But she's close to she's contemplating suicide, where she meets, but then she stumbles into this man who she finds in the sea. And a lot of interesting things happen with this man who comes into her life. The film is essentially about St. Nicholas and about the connection he has with us. And it's also about his links with the sea. This film plays on a lot of cultural connections that the saint has, like with Greeks. He's the patron saint of seafarers and travelers, and he's commonly depicted as being drenched in salt water. And he's also seen as the protector of children in Romanian culture and also in Greek culture. But in the film, you'll see those themes playing throughout. The film essentially, pardon me, the message is about leaving all things to God. You'll see there's certain characters who embrace what happens, and there's some who reject it. These are all things which, over the course of the film, you reflect on, and it's just very telling of different characters. The film doesn't try to say that everyone's life will end happily, but it's a way of showing what could happen when one has their hearts open. The film is about also the nature or the connection between saints and divine people and our earthly existence. It's that relationship between humanity and divine. And it's just interesting to note the main character here and the male character here that you see. After he made this film, he actually went on to become a monk. So this was his last, I guess, on-screen performance. And that's something that's very interesting. Many Orthodox actors end up becoming monks or nuns. So please enjoy the performance. I think he gives a very haunting presence to the film, and hopefully you'll be enticed to watch it again. Now we move on to another class of Orthodox cinema, which is to do with documentaries, documenting Orthodox, I guess you could say, existence. Langa, which is about Orthodox traditions to do in Romania with Christmas carols. It's a beautiful, whimsical film, actually filmed by two Australian brothers of Russian heritage here in Australia. They went over to Romania and they spent time with this youth group who go all over Romania, carrying on the beautiful tradition of caroling and singing carols that are many centuries old. So this is a real feast for the senses, and especially anyone who's of Romanian descent, hopefully will bring back beautiful memories. This film is just simply about just encapsulating the vibe and the joyful energy that comes with celebrating a feast and reliving and being part of tradition. And Orthodox culture is about living tradition. So now I'd like to move on to what are some examples of other Orthodox cinema. And these are films which are not part of the program, but you can actually watch online if you go to transfiguremedia.com. One of the, so my throat's a little bit dry. One of the most iconic Orthodox films to exist is Andrei Rubel. Many of you maybe have seen this or heard about it. Made by the director Andrei Tarkovsky. It's regarded by both Orthodox and secular filmmakers and critics as he's regarded as one of the greatest filmmakers of the 20th century. And in fact, this film is regarded as one of the top 40 films you have to watch before you die. And it's funny because it's entrenched with Orthodox spirituality. Tarkovsky, throughout all his films, he was a fantastic filmmaker. He always focused on human struggle and tried to reconcile that within the spiritual realm. But he was, I guess, being also trying to do it in a very iconic way through cinema. His greatest and most respected work is, of course, Andrei Rublev, which is about the famous iconographer. And I think this is a very fitting film to be talking about, of course, with the cinema of Russian icons. At the very core of this film the message is that beauty will save the world, which of course comes from Dostoevsky. And quite frankly, even the saying of beauty will save the world is at the very crux of Orthodox creativity, because beauty does exist even in challenges. In the film, which is set in a very drab and violent 15th century Russia, we have here the iconographer going through a very bleak world, and I guess you could even say a dark time in Russian history. But throughout this film, and as he struggles to get back into being, to writing icons, we come across many examples of creativity in the film, such as the peasant girl plaiting the hair of a corpse, and the bell maker, and the various struggles that are happening both through society and politically in the film. But what it shows is that creativity can help redeem redeem a broken world by helping to recreate it. Throughout this film, we see all the people are small C creators who go about trying to bring some order into a very turbulent world. The very focus of this film is iconography as a means of creative expression, and it's a way of connecting this world with the divine, and even creativity in general, if it's done within an Orthodox approach and done by somebody who's living an Orthodox lifestyle. It's a way of helping us connect with God. And despite the monk's suffering throughout the film, he ends up creating one of the most remarkable and most identifiable icons in history. It's a profoundly poignant film about the redeeming and salvific role of artists, as long as it's done for the glory of God. And a film which I would say comes to a close second to Andrei Rublev would be the film Ostroff. Now, this is probably one of the most well-known Orthodox films in the last 20 years. The main actor, Peter Manolov, who you see pictured here, he starred in many Orthodox-inspired films, such as Tsar and Priest's Son, which I'll be talking about soon. Unfortunately, he died last year of COVID. He was actually a rock star after the fall of the Soviet Union, and he chose to live a very hermit-type lifestyle. He became very spiritual, and he carried that into his film roles, into his acting roles. And that's just another example of somebody who lives out an Orthodox lifestyle and it reflects into their work. The film has beautiful cinematography. For most of the film, it's in black and white because you have the snow and the black cassocks of what the monks are wearing at the monastery. And the only time we actually see color is from icons and lit visual lamps. And of course, and again in this film, Psalm 50 plays very prominently in the background. There's many beautiful and very poignant spiritual references to the film, such as a scene where you have a nail in rotting wood, and it's a reflection of the soul being the nail and the wood being the body just rotting away. It's a film which tries to show, with a lot of humor, I have to say, how to cut the ties with the world and to live beyond. Another film, which isn't widely seen, but one of my favorites, is called The Healing from Serbia. It has themes to do with nature, grief, and reconciliation. The filmmakers here, who I know personally, a husband and wife team, have a personal connection with war. They were involved in conflict between Bosnians and Serbs in the 90s, but they wanted to create something that would actually benefit humanity and to create some kind of reconciliation. Throughout the film, the visual language is about the relationship between the physical and spiritual worlds. You see the monk cleaning the cell, reaping grass, and just the ebb and flow of water. There's just a lot of beautiful references here. And the filmmaker Ivan actually was a great admirer of, or is a great admirer of nature. And throughout the film, we see the connection between man and creation. And it's therefore just to just remind us of the immense glory of God. The film has an ending which is bittersweet, but in the end, the characters bridge a void that has been created by war. Now in the film, we have both love and forgiveness, which will enable the characters to work towards a physical, emotional, and spiritual healing. It's a film which I hope can be showcased more, hopefully in the near future. Orthodox filmmaking, as I mentioned earlier, is not about showing positive stories and characters all the time. Quite often you see characters who are very flawed. And the thing is, that's just a reality of ourselves. And you find that you are not as harsh towards them because you realize that they are a representation of yourself. And Orthodox cinema tries as much as it can to show that relationship between the individual, humanity, and the divine. Well, excuse me, a wonderful film which is available online to watch, not widely seen, but which is a terrible shame, is Priest's Son. This is an action-packed film. It's got the character Keri Hiroyaki Tagawa, who's actually one of the big actors from Mortal Kombat. He actually learned to speak Russian, and he actually ended up converting to Orthodoxy after this film. It's set in modern Tokyo, where you have Father Nikolai, who is an ex-member of the Yokozo family, but who tries to escape the mob war by going to rural Russia. But he ends up going to a place where the local church is in ruins, and the local villages are all broken up. So despite leaving the dangers of Tokyo, he ends up falling into another perilous situation with corrupt officials who are trying to kick the villagers out of their homes. Priest's Son carries many themes, including the cross-pollination of cultures, Orthodox creativity, just the same as the Orthodox faith, doesn't seek to colonize other people's cultures. It seeks to blend and to take what is beautiful and what can help express Orthodox spirituality. It adopts, and that's what you see in the film. You see Japanese culture mixing with Orthodoxy and Russian culture. It's also got the film of adversity, honor, and humility. In the film, the priest, and this is why it's called Priest's Son, is like a samurai warrior. And he has the characteristics, and it's funny that the samurai warrior and the concept of the Orthodox priest are very overlapped. They're obedient, they go where they're needed, and they do what's right. The film carries many themes within Orthodox filmmaking, and as well as of the spiritual life. There's faithfulness when faced with death, like the saints, patience to endure situations where there doesn't seem to be any good solution, and self-control against the temptation of wealth and power. And you have this priest who comes to this broken village, and it's divided and helps unite it, and it becomes a united family because of this community leader, and shows the importance of having a good moral leader. The drunks of the village develop gentle hearts, a couple learn to love again, and peace reigns over. The film was very much inspired by the classic Seven Samurais and American Westerns in general. And that brings me now to the final class of Orthodox films, which are not necessarily spiritual, but done within an Orthodox approach. One of the films we see is a short film called Mark, and this was at Byzanfest a couple of years ago. It's a very humorous, short film about a man trying to control his environment. There's no explicit spiritual messages. Yet the film has a lot to say about selfishness, wastefulness, and consumerism, which are things which are very closely linked with spiritual life regardless. And as I've mentioned earlier, Orthodoxy has no problem with a creative person being humorous and adventurous. Many films that you'll see seek to be as creative as possible, as long as the filmmaker is creating within the Orthodox spirit and under, and they have also a spiritual guide to help them, as they try and find their way to express their ideas. Orthodox creativity really has no limits of expression as long as it bears good fruit. Because really, at the end of the day, true art, regardless of if it's Orthodox inspired or not, it needs to be meaningful and inventive. This film was actually made by a doctor who works in emergency wards in the US. Even though he doesn't work as a filmmaker by day, it's something that he does because he simply loves. It's a gift that he has, and he wants to share it with others. And this film just shows off his skills and technical abilities. He's an amazing CGI artist. And again, it's just an example of our nature it's within our nature to be creative. Another remarkable film that I came across last year was a film called Lost. It's in the Memento style film. If you remember that film from the 90s, where you have a character who has amnesia. But in this film, which is from Russia, a man is traveling through the desert with his family, and he takes a shortcut and they get lost. And then his wife and son disappear. And as he's trying to, search for them in the desert, sorry, just one moment. Oh, okay, sorry. And as he's trying to search for them in the desert, he comes across a very odd father and daughter who seem to know something, but then again, nothing is quite as it seems. It's a remarkable thriller. I want to say a little bit horror, but mostly thriller. But even though it doesn't come across as a traditional Orthodox film, its final act really packs a punch. In its very essence is a story about evil, the depths of despair, and the heights of mercy. If you want to see, and I have to say, if you want to see more examples of Orthodox films without direct spiritual messages, such as Lost or Mark or any others, there are heaps on Byzanfest's YouTube channel. So if you search Byzanfest and you also go to Transfigure Media, you'll be able to see a whole collection of both short and feature films to enjoy. And I think what I would also like to touch on other films which are definitely not Orthodox, not part of Orthodox cinema, but other Christian films, because I've been going on quite a lot here about Orthodox cinema. But what about Christian cinema in general? Actually, I just need to jump.
Chris, sorry to interrupt.
Oh.
Your PowerPoint disappeared.
Oh, yes, I'm going to jump back to it. Sorry.
Okay, great.
No problem. Thank you. Oh, here we go. Yes, here we go. This is a combination of some recent films that I've been seeing floating around and some old ones. In terms of evangelical film production, even just looking at these posters, you can see straight off the bat, very different to Orthodox cinema. And I'll probably also have to group evangelical and even Mormon films, because they do produce a lot of content. What I've found from these are just my personal observations, but the central characters I've noticed are always just too perfect. And I hate to say, but just looking at these actors, just off these posters, they don't look like anyone that I've ever met, quite frankly. They're just too perfect. And personally, I just find that they don't really share anything in common with either myself, or maybe I would even say most other people. I feel a lot of these filmmakers try to create Christ-like characters, but Christ-like characters without any human insecurities. And the thing is, Christ was both God and man. So he shared in our flawed humanity, and he got to experience those pains as well. But with these films, it almost seems that these characters kind of are missing that component. It's almost like there's a fear that if these characters are seen as flawed, or dare I say, like one of us, that these films might lose their meaning, which I think is terrible. Orthodox cinema doesn't shy away from showing us, as we are, and our hypocrisy. And it's only, as mentioned before, through creativity and through beauty that we can improve ourselves and maybe even redeem the world in a small part. These films seem to also create their own sub-communities. And even though they get a lot of support, I don't feel they are really widespread. Some films will try and get a lot of attention, such as the God's Not Dead franchise. But a lot of these films just sort of didn't have very sort of, just seem to be exposed to their own communities. But then you have a film like Andrei Rublev, which, as mentioned, is one of the top 40 films you have to watch before you die. And Tarkovsky is regarded as one of the greatest filmmakers of the 20th century. So you can, and this is also, I guess, the unique feature of Orthodox cinema, that you can create a film, you can create a work of art that can contain spiritual messages, but can be loved and valued by all. I even had a filmmaker who said to me in a class, there was this student who was, self-proclaimed atheist, and when talking about this film, he said, "Oh, it's not a spiritual film at all," because he valued the film as a piece of art and completely overlooked all the Orthodox undertones to the film. So it is possible to create to create a film with an Orthodox message and it to be loved by all of the world. Now, another, I guess, very broad category of non-Orthodox, my PowerPoints have doubled up here, of non-Orthodox cinema would be Catholic films. Of course, we all know about Passion of the Christ and the Apostle of Christ. There's been many wonderful films made. They're of better quality, I would say, compared to evangelical films in general. But one thing, and I guess this is why there's also a lot of criticism of the film The Passion of the Christ, and I guess I sort of feel this way as well, is that the film wanted us to actually really feel the suffering of Christ, which of course, you are expected to feel the suffering to some extent, but the truth is this is something which we can't possibly recreate. And I honestly feel like there's no point in trying to recreate it, because theatrical drama, dare I say, is a poor substitute to try to recreate a very momentous time in history. In Orthodoxy, for myself personally, during Holy Week, I find the emotion that is generated and felt during the services during Holy Week, it makes you appreciate the suffering of Christ in a very different way. And both the broad evangelical and Catholic categories of films, I find, are not as holistic as Orthodox films. They don't, to the same extent, this is my personal opinion, don't to the same extent interweave different aspects of life. A wonderful example, which I would have liked to have included in the collection at the museum, is the film Christmas Anti-Fable, which was at Byzanfest in 2019, which you can view if you're interested. It's a long, short film, but it intertwines science, noir cinema, climate change, the nativity. Everything is intertwined into it. And it speaks volumes about humanity and its inability to truly be humble. And that's a film which, when I compare it to, let's say, these big blockbuster Catholic films, another one that comes to mind, which I haven't got here, The Silence. That is a remarkable film about a monastic community, a Catholic film about a monastic community. But it just, to me personally, doesn't speak the same volumes when it comes to encapsulating life in general. And this actually brings us close to our conclusion, actually, which is my final words about for Orthodox filmmakers. I would say that cinema is an extension of the icon, and icons are windows into the divine. So if icons are a window into the divine, then Orthodox cinema is about taking icons ourselves, these moving icons, and trying to make that connection with the audience member and the divine. The Orthodox frame and daily practice helps inspire the filmmaker and to create worlds that we know of, but we don't understand. Orthodox cinema is really Orthodox theology. Hopefully I've been able to express that. I'm not sure if I was successful today, but it's about linking everything from our experience and spiritual doctrine in a creative way. And finally, just the same way that an icon is a creative expression of the divine, it's living icons. We are to express the creator and to express that relationship that we have in life on screen. And with that, thank you for listening. And as mentioned, if you'd like to see more examples of Orthodox cinema or just Orthodox creativity in general, please go to transfiguremedia.com. And of course, if you want to learn more about the Orthodox Film Festival, which will hopefully be launched soon again this year for submissions, and will both stream and be screening in cinemas globally in October this year, please go to byzanfest.com, and you'll also find links to previous year's films and just more information about the filmmakers themselves. So thank you for listening, and thank you again to the Museum of Russian Icons in Massachusetts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris. One thing that really struck me when I was planning the screenings with you is just the diversity of the films in subject matter. I was really struck this year, and particularly with the short films, how many dystopian films there were. And I think, that really speaks to the times that we're living in and sort of the anxieties that we have, as a people about the future. And I'm curious, where do you see Orthodox filmmaking going? What is the future of it?
I see it as becoming more and more international. It's really beginning to learn how to market itself better, I would say, because a lot of Orthodox cinema kind of goes under the radar and doesn't get appreciated until many years later. In terms of where it's heading, it's hard to say, actually, because as you mentioned, Amy, a lot of dystopian films, which I actually was excited to receive because like you said, it's a sign of the times. I think a lot of Orthodox filmmakers just like to also touch on how people are feeling, what are the sort of settlements going on globally, but also it's just the filmmakers themselves going through life in general, just like any artist, and deciding him or herself what they think is an important story to tell. A wonderful film which did very well this year, I have to mention it, was from Serbia. It was called God's Will. And I loved it because it was about 4 nuns, and it was one of the best examples I've seen of women in Orthodox cinema. And it was about characters. It was very character driven. And you just watch the film again and again and again, just dissecting like, who are these women and their personalities and how they go about the problem that they're facing in the film. And the wonderful thing I have to mention about the film is that there might be a TV series developed from that short film, because 2 filmmakers from the festival got together now and they're in talks. So hopefully it might become a series in Serbia, we'll see. But it's kind of anyone's guess what will be new stories. I'm just looking forward to receiving a variety of content. I think because there's such a wealth of excellent storytelling, as I mentioned, Tarkovsky laid fantastic groundwork for a lot of filmmakers, and they're just being inspired by his work and just creating their own styles. So I'm not sure that answers the question.
No, that's great.
Thank you.
And I'd like to invite the audience, if you have questions, you can just go ahead and put them either in the chat or the Q&A. It's a small enough group where I can monitor both. I guess one other question I just have, what advice would you have for sort of young up and coming Orthodox filmmakers? What resources are out there and available to them?
Fantastic question. What I've learned in recent years is that one thing's it's money. One thing's it's being based in Los Angeles or Romania, where a lot of Orthodox cinema happens, but it's actually community. So what I would say to young filmmakers is to get involved with other Orthodox filmmakers. I've actually going to be starting up an association for all the previous finalists from Byzanfest over the years, because what I've learned is that getting all these people together, well, in this case virtually, because we're spread all over the globe, is just simply knowing that blah blah in America or blah blah in Greece can maybe help me with my screenplay or doing some editing, or just even just inspiration, just moral support. I think is a really big factor, because I thought it was always money. It's the money, but no, just community and connection and just friendship and fellowship. That's what I would say is the biggest key. And if anyone is interested or anyone knows of anybody who would like to know how to get more involved, or just a few pointers, please contact me through byzanfest.com or transfiguremedia.com. Just follow the links. And I just noticed a question here about what do I think of I haven't seen the film The Gospel According to St. Matthew. I'm sorry, from 1964. No, I'm sorry. I'm not aware of that one. I'm just having a look at if there's any other comments. Not a question, but I just wanted to say how interesting. I won't praise myself. It was to learn about all these different. Oh, okay. No, thank you for that statement. No, it's just just trying to come up with an idea of how to express Orthodox cinema. A lot of the focus with Orthodox creativity in general is always we always refer back to the icon, which is there's nothing wrong with looking at the icon, but I guess it's by using the principles of iconography, as of course the museum is a champion of promoting. Taking those principles, I think, are very important. Like, even though iconography is based nearly 2 millennia old, if you think back to St. Luke, who wrote the first icon, taking the principles of iconography are a really good base to decide or figuring out how to express Orthodox cinema. And of course, the letter from St. Basil, fantastic. Please, if you're somebody who just, or if you're just someone who just loves cinema, please read his letter. You learn so much that it is perfectly fine to look at even, like, I don't want to use the word secular media, but I'll use it because it's easy to explain. But even looking at secular media, there are flicks of gold that can actually be a benefit, and even just pure enjoyment. So please, if anyone has any questions, even just to make a statement about a film that they maybe really enjoyed, I don't want to drag this up for hours, but it's very easy to drag it for hours. It's at your own peril, but please, I'll just throw any question. Unfortunately, this year's Byzanfest short films are not available for screening. I do hope to get them online in the next couple of months, because there's been the amount of demand there is. I'll say every couple of days, I always get an inquiry or two from people saying, "Oh, I missed the festival. How can I watch the films?" Mm-hmm. The wonderful thing, and I think this is probably why Byzanfest came into fruition at this particular point in time, because to create the festival in, let's say, 2010, I don't think it would have worked, because just the very nature of how we consume our media has just changed so much, even in the last 5 years. I remember just before I got married, actually, which was 5 years ago, Netflix was still on DVD and being posted. And now it's like, who does that anymore? It's just
Right.
it seems so ancient, like, so the future also of Orthodox cinema is it's on demand, it's going online, and Byzanfest is hoping to try to make it more accessible to the masses. So just watch this space, I guess.
I know. Well, just the experience of in cinema screenings is just so different now. I mean,
Oh,
COVID aside, I think in cinema screenings, we're starting to be challenged a little bit. This idea of you'd go to the cinema, with your friends, and it would be your own little community. But then, at least here in the United States, they started changing the structure of cinemas, how the seating was. They made it feel more like home. And then now with these streaming services, you can just consume it all right in your home, so it's interesting. All right, we have a couple questions coming in. So Marina asked in the chat, could you please share your thoughts on why,
why did you select the first? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so it's about your slide selection for Orthodox inspired creativity. What mood were you looking to create? And I know this was asked by an artist.
Oh, okay. Was that the first slide?
The first slide, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, actually, that's that's me. That was the first poster I created for Byzanfest back in 2014. I guess I just wanted to create something that's very orthodox in terms of its creative process. Because Orthodox creativity is, I'm sorry, I feel like I'm a broken record here, but anyway, you've all paid to listen to me. So I wanted to really overlap the two themes, because one thing that myself as an Orthodox Christian is Orthodox Christianity to me is like a rope, which is two braids that are intertwined together. And if you have it as a single braid, it will break. But when it's two and it's intertwined, which is like the Orthodox faith and culture and creativity and everything under that umbrella, good luck trying to break it. And I was thinking, now, how do I express cinema and orthodoxy? Cinema and orthodox, cinema and orthodox. And then I thought, well, what's the most iconic? And then I think, okay, iconic. So what's iconic? What's iconically cinema? The slate. And then I was thinking, what's iconically orthodox? Well, icon. But then I thought, well, the prayer rope comes like at second. And I thought, well, the prayer of the heart, and the fact that I'm supposed to be promoting the Orthodox Phroma in the creative process. So, want to bring the two together. And yeah, that's how that idea, that image came together. And that's why if you look at previous Byzanfest posters, one of my favorites has to be the vigil lamp, which is a little film reel instead of a cork floater. And I just thought, the idea of, it's an offering to God. And you're like lighting up, you're lighting up a dark space, you're lighting up the world, and you also offer prayers. So it's just about trying to mash the two together in a very creative and succinct way. So I hope that answers Marina's question.
Yes, yeah, I think so. Well, I think, kind of what you're getting at is this idea that it's all very intentional, and that goes back to the icon, right? There's nothing in an icon that isn't supposed to be there, even though we may not always know the meaning behind it or know what the iconographer was trying to convey to us, but it is there for a reason. So I think when you take that into consideration in terms of cinema and even just, promotional materials, that's all messaging, right? Kathy just wants to know, what year was the film Lost produced?
Oh, I think it was 2016. I'm not sure if I've got a link to it on my. Let me see if I can quickly find it. I don't know if I got on the Transfigured Media website. I do have a page called Screen on Byzanfest, on Transfigured Media, where you can watch films that have been uploaded for free. I'll see if I can quickly find it. I can talk and Google at the same time. But it's a film, unfortunately, it's not in very high resolution, like how it's been uploaded. But please, if you can watch on your smartphone, please do. I found it. Here we go. This film, honestly, really knocked my socks off. Okay, so I've got it. So everyone's very lucky now, I've got a direct link to it. I'll just put in the message box thingy. There we go. Oh, now I've got it playing in the background. There we go. But yeah, so hopefully everyone can enjoy that. But like I said, watch on your smartphones because it's you won't be able to watch on a big screen. And I've got to say, watching on a little screen actually made it even more intense for me because it's like I'm so much closer to what's happening. And yeah, Orthodox cinema, and actually, as you said, Amy, about how things have changed with COVID, it is a shame that you just can't go to the cinema as easily. Even for myself, I haven't gone to the cinema since, well, basically since COVID, so that's like over 2 years now. And I think watching film too is also it's a very communal experience. And I kind of wonder, I don't know how everyone else feels, that the fact that there's maybe some hesitation to go to the cinema, do you think it robs some of that experience of watching a film when you watch it with other people, even if they're all strangers? What do you think, Amy?
An interesting thought. I mean, I think about, all the sort of blockbusters, right? When you go to see the blockbusters and just feeling that anticipation, I'm thinking maybe just like off the top of my head of like the Lord of the Rings series, for example. There was so much anticipation about that series, and watching it with just a bunch of strangers and you're all reacting at the same time to the same moments. And it's just, you feel some sort of connection. And I think that's lost for sure, even though you may still be watching the same films in the comfort of your home with people that well, most likely you do like the same things. And so it's, of course, you're still spending time with those people, but I don't know, you're not growing your community, I guess.
And I guess even as an individual, it's an experience too, that in a film, what you maybe a moment that you may have not found funny or was interesting, but when you realize that other people maybe appreciate it, it gives you a bit of insight too, because sometimes it's easy to just, it's like put headphones and live in a little bubble. And sometimes, because it is important to gain other people's perspective. And I think that's what always drew me to cinema, is that you listen to other people's opinions, you reflect on what you've seen, and you put the two together. And I was just seeing here, Eben has written a very good question. And I'm so glad you asked this, because I have a perfect response for it actually too. Because I was talking with a priest friend yesterday who's in Poland. Now the question is, earlier you mentioned how the lead actor in Priest's Son converted to Orthodoxy after getting the role. What do you think about non-Orthodox artists making Orthodox films? This isn't a is it right or wrong question. It's more an open-ended. I'm glad that you did, because that's actually something I forgot to touch on. Two parts. Firstly, there's been actually several examples I've come across of people who are not Orthodox, not even Christian even, who have actually made films which are about Orthodoxy or just about Orthodox culture. I've come across several examples. I guess you could say that's actually a fourth type of Orthodox cinema, that made by people who don't, I guess, or who don't choose to live an Orthodox life and put that into their creative process. There was actually a film that was shared with me by a priest in Poland. This is the second part to the question. I can't remember the name of the film. It's from Germany. It was about the Tartic. If you give me one moment, I might remember it. No, sorry, it's escaped me. But there's a final scene where the camera goes under the ice sheets, and it's just, you got the ice above, you got the light coming through, you see all these like little strange sea anatomy just floating around, and then all of a sudden there's this hierarchical hymn that's sung when a high-ranking bishop attends in the Russian church. And it's all in Slavonic, and it's the actual hymn for the introduction into or entry into the church during it's all in Russian, and the priest himself was like befuddled. It's like, why is he playing this in this film where it had nothing to do with Orthodoxy? It was about the environment, and I asked him, oh, was he maybe Orthodox or just inspired by Orthodoxy? And in an interview, he found out that this German filmmaker, simply one day he went into a Russian church and he said he was so taken back by the beauty of the church, by the iconography, by what he heard, what he saw, because he saw the liturgy unfolding. And he thought, it's so beyond this world, I have to include this in a film. And when you do watch the film, and like I said, there were all these like little sea anemone floating around, things I haven't seen. And who of us will really go to the Antarctic and go underneath the ice sheets? It's otherworldly. So in a way, you could have non-Orthodox people be inspired by our culture and faith to help express things which are beyond understanding, which I think is a very interesting concept when you reflect on it. And yes, please, thank you for making mention, Maria, about Man of God. I'm sorry I didn't include that. That's probably like the hottest film out there. Everybody's always asking me, oh, Chris, do you know how to get to the film? Do you have a link to it? It's like, no, I do not. I wish I do. I actually know the director. She's a lovely lady, but when's it going to come to Australia? When's it going to come to America? It's anyone's guess. Really, what I've been told by the director and her husband is that they've really been fought by, like, Sony wants it, Universal wants it, everybody wants this film, even though it's a purely Orthodox film, a lot of the big streaming companies have been really fighting to get the rights to it. So it's anyone's guess when it's going to be widely available, hopefully soon. And hopefully soon here in Australia. I don't know when, but that's anyone's guess. There's another film which is still in production called The Greek Job. And that's a film about, it's based in Greece, about a mobster who becomes a monk on Mount Athos. And then 15 years later, he gets drawn back into his life of crime, or he has to settle old business. And it's all about, having to leave the monastery, take care of what's going on, and the battle between, trying to distance yourself from the old life and embrace the new life. So hopefully that will be coming out in the next year or so. It's still in production. Of course, there's always a whole lot of new documentaries coming out. Hopefully a TV series, like I mentioned, inspired by God's will. And yeah, I'm sorry, off the top of my head, I can't think of any others, but surely there'll be more. And that's why Byzanfest exists. Byzanfest exists so that those films will hopefully, be submitted and can be shared for a short period of time. And hopefully, we can all enjoy.
Yes. Well, we are just about at time. So Chris, thank you so much. This was really insightful, great audience questions and participation. And clearly we need to screen more films at the museum. And I hope, I know I see some of the people in attendance tonight are local to the museum. So I hope to see you tomorrow afternoon for our 3 films. I'm really looking forward to screening them. And I look forward to our future collaborations as well.
No, thank you so much. And again, your support over the years too, because the museum has always been, we've always had a close connection. Films have been screened in the past. Of course, COVID has, mucked things up for both of us a little bit. Just a little bit. At times it almost made me cry, for what was going to happen in 2020. But no, look, it's been a wonderful relationship, and I look forward to continuing it.
Wonderful. Well, thanks again. And we'll have a good day, Chris. And
good night
to everyone else.
And look, thank you everyone for joining us. And yes, please just, if you have any other questions or want to get in contact, I'm always available. But thank you again for being here tonight.